Hello again. Welcome to another exciting edition of Cambridge Inside Out. My name is Robert Winters, and Judy's off today.
And I'm here.
So, allow me to introduce the world to Mr. Patrick Barrett.
Hello, world. Fleischman, I'm finally here.
So, anyway, we'll, it was always our plan when we revived the program that we were going to have guests sort of cycling through here at times. So this is where it begins.
This is exactly where it begins. I thank you for having me on. I'm
Very
pleased.
welcome.
I can't wait to say all sorts of nasty things. So let's get going.
Chill out, buddy. Chill out. By the way, for those that don't know, Patrick is a property owner in Central Square. Actually owns the building where our beloved Tuscanini's is located.
Winter is coming.
There we go.
Sure.
I thought that was Winters.
No trademark infringement whatsoever. This is completely
All right,
original
that's pretty
concept.
cool. And also served on the Central Square Advisory Committee that it was part of the K2, C2 process several years ago, and is also the author of the Barrett petition, which is before the City Council right now. Some of these topics we will get to shortly. But just to get rolling here, we always like to start this program off with a few little announcements of things that are happening around town. And I'm not going to give too many of them here today, but one of the things that's up and coming, actually began, I think, on Saturday, was just as last year we had the participatory budgeting process, and that began with a big kickoff event on Saturday, and it runs through, was it say? I think through the 12th?
The 12th, and absolutely no mention of my idea, which was a performance space in Jill Brown Park, or, and as an homage to you, a miniature golf course, which
right. Now here's my concept. We need not just miniature golf course, but we need to take over Kendall Square, dive into Kendall Square, and occupy. I don't even use the word occupy.
You just said occupy.
I'm sorry. Okay.
That's the word of the day.
So we're gonna occupy the spaces between the buildings. We're gonna actually plot them out like a miniature golf course that actually wends its way between the buildings of Kendall. And each hole will have an artwork, that'll represent something very specific to Cambridge. So,
artwork? I thought you said margarita machine.
well, we could do that too. But one of the things we could have, for example, is, instead of the windmill, we could have a perfect replica of the MIT dome, right? Yeah. And people can, putt right in there and sort of do that.
I love the concept. I love the idea. I'm not sure why we're not on top of that. Mr. City Manager, if you're listening,
that's right. Right. We appeal to you as men of goodwill.
For the good of the city.
But we can have an art competition. We can have artists design a hole. You win a hole. You get to do hole number 13 and whatever.
Don't sell me. Sell it to the people. God,
absolutely, to the people. So we got to put this in for the next round of participatory budgeting next year.
Miniature golf coming to Kendall Square next year.
I have it on good authority that some of the representatives from MIT Property Management Group are very receptive to the idea. Right?
How could you not be?
Yeah, well, the problem is they eventually, even if they sort of entertain the idea, some of the sort of gray suity people, they come back and they go, oh, no, we can't really do that. Well, you can do that.
So much more exciting than a toilet in Central Square. Not anywhere near my property.
Absolutely. All right, so that's participatory budgeting, and you should go out there. But I voted last night. I won't tell you what I voted for, but I did vote. You get to vote for up to 6 of the items, and I think there are 23 to choose from. Yeah. Now, some other things that are happening. It was a Cambridge with the very few city council meetings left in this council term. Right, the current council dies with the end of December, and the new one will be inaugurated in early January.
There's only one left, right?
There will only be one left. So right now we had the one yesterday was December 7th, and the next one will be on December 21st. I believe there's a roundtable meeting next week, though I don't remember the topic.
I have no idea what the topic is. I've been immersed in Barrett petition.
That's right. Here we go. You're the man. You be the man. Right. So, but at the meeting last night, they did move along certain things. There was let's sort of dispense with some of the others. The famed Volpe petition, the PUDKS, everything's in code. I feel like I'm at MIT here.
You're at WKRP and CCTV.
That's right. So at the PUDKS petition, aka the Volpe petition, which seeks to rezone of, I believe it's a 14-acre site, subject to certain conditions, like whether you have to rebuild a new building for the Volpe Transportation Center, and you can develop the rest of the property, and the proceeds are supposed to build you the building. The problem is that once the whole process began, and everybody was wanting something like this to happen, so you could develop some housing in and around Kendall Square, but it was like one constraint after another. There's got to be a lot of open space, and there's got to be a lot of housing, and not just housing. There's got to be a lot of affordable housing, and not just affordable housing, but it's got to be 20%.
20% low income, then 5% middle income,
and I think by the time it was all loaded up, fully loaded with all these good things, it became untenable. And now at this point, the city council is just bailing out and saying this is not ready for prime time. It's not going to happen.
I hate the expression "not ready for prime time." I've heard it from the only real detractor of the Barrett petition. But the Volpe thing from the get-go has been sort of cart before the horse. We have this humongous plot of land. No one celebrates the Volpe site as it is now.
Right.
But
you mean you don't like surface parking lots and
well,
fenced off green areas?
No, I don't actually. It's kind of horrible. Yeah. But the issue is you've got this sort of amorphous building you're supposed to build for the government, and you've got this huge, you have no idea what the price tag is on that, and you've got no real developer sort of guiding the conversation as you typically would have in a situation like this, with an evil Alex Twining or an evil Patrick Barrett, saying
well, that goes without
saying I need X amount of units, otherwise this project isn't going to work. So from the get-go, you've got sort of a blank slate, and the community development department's done sort of a Herculean job of trying to bring this all together,
make something happen. Yeah.
And the one, and I have to say I love you, Dennis, but the one planner on the council who could really do a lot of good for this project, leadership-wise, has sort of been silent, where he could have played the role of the developer and given us something to at least look at.
Are you suggesting there should be leadership amongst the city council?
I'm suggesting that there is, but it needs to be more...
We need to hash this out a little bit.
More present. You need to let everybody else know, Dennis Carlone is a city planner. He's knows zoning through and through. He's a very smart guy. And in other situations has taken some leadership roles in trying to re-envision or guide other developers in certain directions. But for this one, we have no developer. So,
right. It's actually kind of a unique situation with zoning. Normally, in an ideal world, you envision what you want for an area, you lay down the zoning, and then developers will come and go, yeah, I can work with that. And if they can't, they'll maybe propose a change or whatever. But the thing is, it's a logical succession. This one here, it's like crystal ball driven.
Well, if someone came to you and said, listen, I want you to build me a building, I can't tell you how much it's going to cost, I can't tell you how big it's going to be or what really is going to go inside it, and then when you're done building that, you might get whatever's left over, and we've got no idea what you can build on it.
Right.
That sounds
awful. Kind of a total right. So
run
now,
for the hills.
Now maybe come January, February, they'll refile this, and maybe they'll sort of come up with something that'll work, and be more acceptable to more people. I'm starting to become not very optimistic. So, and people say, well, I've heard lately there's this discussion. They say, well, don't worry. If that happens, then Volpe eventually they're just going to move out to Waltham. And then the federal government will dispose of the entire site, and then we'll get everything we want and more for a better price and much more acceptable. I think the more likely scenario is Volpe says, well, we've been here for 50-something years. We can stay for another 50. Thank you very much.
It's not entirely broken.
So please enjoy those surface parking lots and gaze upon the green space that we will not let you on.
Do you think there's a scenario in which the Volpe can say, we're going to leave and we're going to retain the land for another federal use that's even more
that depends upon
awful than what's currently there?
Well, certainly that's all very much driven by who's the federal bureaucrats who are making those decisions, and nobody knows. Anyway, be that as it may, it looks like Volpe is going to get iced, at least for a short while. We'll see what happens. There was simultaneous another Kendall Square related zoning petition, not that we want to obsess just on zoning petitions, but
pretty exciting stuff, though. Come on.
Well, it's a matter of taste.
Everyone's talking about it. The Kardashians are all about the story.
Yeah, that's right. The Kardashians are really into zoning. It's a different type of zoning, I believe, but yeah. Who are the Kardashians? Anyway, the MXD district, so it's the, what is it? I always get kind of confused by these things, but it's the KSMXD, Kendall Square MXD district, which is one of the ones that encompasses at least part up to Ames Street. I think it's the block that has the Marriott on.
I believe
it's the
it
big
is.
one, right? Yeah. So there are some proposals to change this to allow for some better use, to build some better housing, and some other modifications. The developer there is the same developer that's been working the land, so to speak, for the last 20, 30 years or more, Boston Properties. But this is a process that has been very much shepherded by the brass of the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority. So they've got it pretty much ready. I think Councilor Toomey voted against passing it to a second reading last night, but 8 councilors voted to pass it to a second reading, which basically puts it in the queue for ordination. So if all were to go ideally, we'll never know, but we'll see in 2 weeks. But then I think maybe there's a little bit of coaxing about maybe squeezing a little more affordable housing arrangement out of Ames Street housing.
There was much more support for it than I thought there was going to be.
Yeah, I based on maybe because I was influenced by reading a tract that Tim Toomey had posted on his blog, that I thought, okay, they're going to deep six this as well. But and the rhetoric actually at the meeting started to look that way. But then then followed by another, then another city councilor say, well, this one's actually close. It's kind of different from the other one, Volpe. And before you knew it, there were plenty of votes. I think it was an 8-1 vote to pass to a second reading, which does not ordain it. It just means that it's in the queue, and it potentially could be ordained on December 21st. Now, if it's not, then it would expire the following day.
22nd, yeah.
And so the thing is then they'd have to restart the whole process. So if I was a betting man, my guess is that there's some kind of a concession, maybe from.
Well, isn't this exactly where you want your developer to be? You've got a deadline. You've got to refile. It's going to be, a total pain and much more expenses incurred. They've been kind of difficult with the affordable housing component, and I've listened. It's these arguments get so entangled, and it's the same old faces show up at these meetings, and oftentimes you want to disagree with the person across you just because you don't want them to be right. But in this particular instance, I think that the Ames Street parcel, there has to be some adherence to the zoning that they wrote themselves, and some concession. If you're talking about a handful of units in a project, that's not the margin.
That shouldn't break a deal.
No, and it's a good neighbor and a good business partner with the city that concedes and says, listen.
That's it. So I'm putting my money on ordination of something pretty close to what's already there come the 21st. All right. A couple other items happen here. One piece of information I thought was pretty interesting was one of the councilors had requested information on resident parking permits. So the data came back from the traffic and parking people, which basically showed that the trend is that as people are moving into the city in a lot of the new housing developments, they're using fewer and fewer cars.
I'm shocked.
Right?
Surely that must be some kind of conspiracy brought on by pro-development advocates to undo the universe.
Absolutely. I don't believe a word of it.
I suspect it's that Saul Tannenbaum.
It must be. I think actually, though, it's the number that they gave, which was like for every new unit, there was 0.26 motor vehicles, as opposed to like 1.
Really?
Yeah.
That's shockingly
the
low.
citywide average is like 0.9, but in the new ones, it's like way down. Now, that's a little bit of a false number, and I think the head of traffic and parking kind of acknowledges much, because, if you open up a new building and you say, oh, and by the way, if you like parking, we're going to charge you, $1 billion a month just to park your little Toyota, some people are going to go, well, if I'm reasonably close and there's some ample on-street parking, I might just forego that and just basically get a resident sticker and still have a car, but it might not have been in the numbers.
It also may be the case too, and I'm going to say this anonymously. I know I have a neighbor somewhere in the city who has one residential parking sticker, and he's got 4 cars. And he does not even use the one parking space that he's got on his property.
You know, I remember a bunch of years ago, there was a proposal, the first time there was a proposal put in for charging, this was back when I think it was either $4 or $8 for a resident sticker. It would be like $4 or $8 for the first one, and then it would go up to like 15 or 20, and then up to like 50, whatever. And then somebody came in who had like 7 cars, said like, this is an outrage.
Parking in Cambridge is still the cheapest, most cost-effective thing that we offer people. You know, if you're looking at commercial spaces or to rent a space in the city, right now you're looking anywhere between $200 and $300 a month.
Right.
And what do you pay for a residential parking sticker?
I know, but it's a courtesy.
And you can get the pass too to
I know,
your friends.
I know. This is one of the perks you get. It's like when you take the job working in the company. You know, you get the executive washroom key. You get in Cambridge they give you the ability to park around the city.
I also love where it says right in the municipal ordinance, "Thou shalt be able to park directly in front of thine own home." That's a wonderful thing they put there.
Actually, that's not really.
It's not there. Oh, I just assumed.
But it would be nice, wouldn't it? We're all capable of a little selfishness here and there. Let's fess up all. All right. So anyway, I thought that was interesting information. Another piece of information is that we've now got a new chair of the License Commission. I'm not going to say too much about that, but good luck.
Godspeed.
Yeah, Godspeed to Nicole Maraki Ferrer. And I hope that you.
I look forward to watching your many videos on YouTube.
Yeah. We do have a couple of annoying characters who insist on recording license commissions, not for the sake of public information, but just to be jerks.
Cartoonish in their awkwardness.
Cartoonish in their awkwardness. Absolutely. So anyway, those are a bunch of the things. Oh yes, and I'll just say here that I was very entertained when Mr. Williamson, James, got up to the mic and objected to the $25,000 expenditure, or actually not expenditure, a transfer of funds within the mayor's office budget to cover various ceremonial events, including an event that was held that I attended for people who serve at no pay to serve on various city boards and commissions. See, apparently Mr. Williamson is outraged because he wasn't invited. I said, well, I don't think I'm going to be holding my breath for the day when Mr. Williamson is appointed to the planning board. But honestly, when I went to that event, and I believe me, not all the money is going just for that one event. That's my tribe, I have to say. Is I've served on city boards and commissions, and to me, this is sort of one of the ultimate callings of a civic beast, is to serve on one of these committees.
Isn't that? And I know, relatively speaking, I'm new to Cambridge, but the call of what I would call the super citizen activist is sort of like, why aren't you interested in my opinion? Why have I not been invited? Why did you not first come to me? Right. To figure out what it is you should be doing.
Well, that is in the city charter. And there are certain individuals.
Wait a second.
Certain individuals are granted absolute veto power over all legislation.
My
so
goodness.
unless you go to them and kiss that pinky ring, right? You're not allowed to file a zoning petition, and you are certainly not allowed to have it passed.
The great news, though, is if you are new to Cambridge, they self-identify within the first 5 minutes of being in city council.
Right. Absolutely right. Or we like to call them the usual suspects. So anyway, those are a few items here. We've probably spent quite a bit of time just talking about some of those. Let's talk a little bit about, we'll get back to the Barrett petition, which we very much want to talk about, and maybe some Central Square related things.
Yes.
But one thing I found, I just saw in the news yesterday and actually thought was pretty interesting, was there was a proposal from Governor Baker for, I forget the name of it's called. It's like a municipal cities and towns streamlining bill. It's sort of an omnibus bill that basically tries to fix this very broad range of little annoying
bureaucratic gridlock.
Annoying things that are just outdated, obsolete, or just hopelessly inefficient. And it's a relatively long list, and if I tried to list all of the aspects of this, it'd be.
Well, as an advocate of liquor in general, I would say that the idea that we should deregulate some of the liquor licenses and how that works is a godsend. Although you're going to have, I think, kind of like an Uber-like effect where existing spaces are going to say, no, we don't want this because it'll be, diminishes the value of our transferable license that we have.
That's right. The license I paid far too much for right, will lose its luster if we would allow other people.
The horrible system I had to buy into, we should consecrate that until I'm able to sell my license and get out.
It's sort of analogous to the Uber versus the taxi cab medallion battle that was going on there, where they said, "How dare you? Don't you realize we paid $300,000 for this license to be a part of the cartel?"
I'm somewhat sympathetic to that too. It's just, the idea of proliferating a system that's horrible is not a good idea.
Absolutely right. So anyway, it's not as simple as just let's give out a lot of liquor lists. It's just basically take some of the state role and invest a little bit more into the local authorities. I think it'll have more of an effect in other towns than Cambridge, but it's it was sort of a step in the right direction. By the way, there's no saying how many of these provisions of this bill are actually going to make it through the State House. Right, this may be a long slog, and by the time all of the lobbyists get in, you're liable to just butcher it and take out a lot of the really interesting ones.
And if I was a betting man, I'd say the strategy employed here is put as many things in it as you possibly can, and hopefully they'll miss a few and you'll get them in.
I think that might be right, yeah. One of the other interesting things, well, there's several I'll just mention a few interesting ones. Kind of funny that this would be in there, but there's a provision, a clause in there giving a city or town right of first refusal if a property such as, I think it's for nonprofit property, including church property. So, if a church closes down, rather than just having it immediately go to the developer who wants to pay the most money for it, first crack at it would have to go to the cities and towns or a designated agency of a city and town.
Well, I'd have to see how the first right of refusal was written, but typically how they work is you go to the person who has that right, but you go to the free market to determine the value of the property.
Yeah.
So that even though a developer might offer X amount of dollars for it, the municipality then has the ability to go buy it at that price.
That's right. You're not going to require the Catholic Church or whatever to just give it up on a dime on the dollar just because of some provision of state law. That would be a regulatory taking.
It sure would.
It sure would. Mr. Barrett also is a lawyer.
Attorney, actually.
Attorney, pardon me. What's the difference between an esquire and a lawyer and an attorney?
An attorney has passed the bar and can practice law.
Yeah. Okay.
A lawyer has just gone to law school and has their JD.
That's good enough. That's good enough for me. I want you to represent me at my trial.
In all things.
Absolutely. So that's one would give a little more leverage for, let's say, the Cambridge Affordable Housing Trust should there be, church property were made available. One other interesting one. This was something that was rumored some years ago. Was right now if a city council is about to pass a zoning petition or other thing that requires legal notice, it has to be printed in a paper of general circulation. But fewer and fewer people are subscribing to papers of general circulation, more people getting it online. So there's a good call for having some of those notices or all of those notices be made available through means other. Anything, I think the law that's proposed here is anything that's, as long as it's in agreement with provisions of the open meeting law, it doesn't necessarily have to be printed in a paper of general circulation.
So what you're basically saying is the Cambridge Chronicle should immediately call the governor's office and ask them to remove this?
It was listed amongst the lobbyists who wanted to really fight this, were the newspaper organizations. Shocking. So anyway, I thought that was a significant thing. There are some changes to the municipal procurement laws, which said if you're going to bid on a contract up to a certain figure, you got to go through certain procedures, and then between other amounts, other procedures. So they're updating that. So anyway, not to go on and on and on about this here, but the thing is, it was a huge list of provisions that are part of this proposed bill, and it'll be kind of interesting to see what goes through, or maybe some other things can go in. One thing that's actually kind of relevant, I think, the people of the Cambridge Election Commission is that why would something having to do with elections show up in there? But there was some provision that would allow and when you go to vote, the wards, the people who are in charge of that to actually have like a little computer screen where they can look up and see whether you're registered. Mm-hmm. So it won't be just a matter of taking the paper printed ones that are all taped to those nice banquet tables and looking. So I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith, but you're not on here. Oh, you'll have to vote a protest ballot or a provisional ballot and whatever, and go through this. They'll actually be able to go and look you up. And
modernization.
Yeah. Now these are things you would think, well, why would the state law prevent you from doing that sensibly anyway? But apparently it did. And so now this would give the local elections officials a little more authority on how to do things. And So I think those are little things. Anyway, there are a few other items.
This just sounds like a laundry list of things that have probably been bothering local municipalities. They sort of all out once and said, let's just bring it all as one bill and try to get as much of it as we can.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of reminiscent of when they had a kind of an elections reform provisions over the last couple of years. Most of it didn't go through, but some did, to allow for early registration, for early voting, so that you don't have to pretend as if you're out of town. You just don't feel like showing up on election day, so you can do. There's some early voting. There's a few other provisions.
I like my sticker.
I like my sticker. I voted. Yeah, absolutely. And to me, honestly, it's a bit of an overstatement when people say that people have extreme hardship to get to voting. Actually, there was a bill in a previous city council meeting 2 weeks ago from Councilman Mazin. I think it was the one who was saying how we should have early voting all day long for, was it like 11 or 12 days at precincts across the city, which would have been enormously expensive and thoroughly unnecessary.
How'd that fare?
It was referred to government operations, so it will die with the end of the year. So thank you. So long. It's been no, I'm sure it'll get refiled again. And some aspect of it is okay. Do you think is have a few early voting locations scattered around the city for a few days here and there is just a courtesy. It's not a bad idea. But mandating there must be like ones in every precinct throughout the city for 11 days and whatever, it's just ridiculous.
These are staffed by volunteers.
No, actually election workers are paid.
Okay, so so what's the cost associated with?
It's a lot, and the thing is that the provisions that they had, they didn't take into account the fact that you'll need security at every single one because these are ballots, right? So so you'll have to have police detail officers at every one of these. It's very involved. So anyway, but that was part of an omnibus bill at the legislature. Anyway, we're down to our last 20 seconds of this half hour. We will come back.
People are on the edge of their seats to hear about the Barrett petition.
We're going to talk about the Barrett petition, and we're going to talk about Central Square as well in the next half hour. So, now we're down to 10 seconds, Patrick. So,
Central Square and the Barrett petition.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Anyway, until then, we'll see you in a few minutes.